only 18% of media plans include Twitch, which if you look at your data, it's the highest converting channel according to your metrics. And yet only minority of folks continue to use it even this year after you've seen massive growth. Welcome to Games Growth with Uptick. We have one of our longest standing partners and guests on the podcast this week, Gamesight. I will let the Gamesight folks talk about what that is in just a second. But Adam, just so you know, I was doing some little digging through our backlog, and this is your fourth time with Uptick, which I think puts you in number one in terms of guest spots with Uptick ever. So congratulations.
Is there trophy or leaderboard? Yeah, what I'm into it in general, but like who am I competing with? Who's number two? Why do I dominate?
Your reward is you get to talk us through a very hefty report.
Hefty. It's been called dense by some.
No, we're super excited to have you guys on the show, Adam and Christian. I always love having Gamesight on. I feel like you guys are brothers and sisters from another mother. Like we're both always monitoring and working on growth within the gaming sector. And I feel like our companies are just specced in different but complementary ways. You guys have tons of deep expertise in PC, console. You guys are OGs in all things creator and influencer. And, my background is more born of the mobile side of things, more of the performance marketing side of things. So every time I get to talk to you guys, I feel like I am filling in blind spots for myself and the team of you guys just being like very boots on the ground in some sectors where they're more ancillary for us. And you guys put together a great report, the state of performance marketing for video games. I love that you called them video games. I don't know why. I feel like our industry never says the phrase video games.
I like it though. So it sounds nice.
It's like, oh yeah, video games. Yeah, they're fun. So yeah, stick around regardless of the sector of gaming you work into. I think there's going to be something for everyone in this. If you work in PC and console, there's going to be a lot of very direct learnings from this. If you work exclusively in mobile, I think there is a lot to learn about potential blind spots for mobile performance marketing where some of the PC and console segments are getting edge or tapping certain pockets of inventory that are underutilized in mobile. So it's going to be a nice eat your vegetables episode, as we say, and I think you'll learn a lot.
Well, without further ado, we'll jump right in. I'd like to start at the very highest level. Adam, Christian, assume most people know what Gamesight is if you're listening to this podcast, but if you don't, we just give us the high level of what you are and what is the goal behind producing the state of performance marketing report.
Sure. Yeah. Gamesight is a marketing tools and service company for the video games industry. Definitely work heavily in PC and console with like sprinkling and mobile, primarily through lots of partners now that are cross-platform, cross-play, all of that good stuff. We do a bunch of different things at Gamesight. Sort of the most germane to this discussion today is our marketing measurement platform. I had someone, I think, I saw an email the other day that called us an MMP, and I was like, it's clear that term doesn't mean what it used to, or like it's just become this sort of generalized term. There are someone's like, oh, you know what the first M in MMP is, but you could sort of think about us like an MMP, but focusing on PC and console where the challenges and technology stacks are different and the partners work differently. And so that's a tool we've been developing for many years now. Definitely OGs in that respect, work with hundreds of games across PC and console, indie to AAA. And the kind of heart behind the report is that so much, I think maybe uniquely different than mobile, PC and console video games industry is more secretive, is more behind closed doors. There's not nearly as much data published. There's not nearly as many LinkedIn influencers pushing about the best, UA strategy they've had for their game last week. That stuff is like trade secret, right? You have primarily big PC console game publishers are 20, 30-year-old companies. They oftentimes grew up in a world of a very fixed pie between, console wars and platform wars. The last thing in the world they ever wanted to do is tell you their secrets to finding new players for their games. And that is part of what we're trying to kind of move that part of the industry forward with sharing best practices and certainly data to help buyers make informed decisions about where they spend their money, where to find players, and of course how to make more money. So that is the idea, is to sort of demystify a lot of the mysticism. And again, for folks in mobile, this is like, duh, everyone does this, everyone's been doing this forever. That just isn't really the world that we live in. So trying to kind of push in that direction when necessary. So I don't know, Christian, anything to add on that? And Christian, of course, runs our data solutions team. So his team's actually grepping through all this data, deriving the insights, all the smart stuff. So I don't know, do you have any other kind of heart behind the report and why we do it and why you like it?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, speaking of the team, obviously need to give a huge shout out to Nico and Sam and Sarah and all the other people that helped kind of put all this together. One of the most common questions that we get from publishers, even before they're even Gamesight customer, we might still be in that pre-sales process, and we'll still get the question of like, well, where should I be spending? Like, what's hot right now? What networks are most performant? Where am I going to get the most bang for my buck? And part of that comes from what Adam said. A lot of that knowledge is secretive. The industry is just under its own restrictions. There's different things that they have to contend with that mobile companies don't have to contend with, and they don't get to learn from like adjacent industries and things like that. So all of this knowledge is kind of kept under wraps. We obviously see it across the entire PC console space. So we're kind of uniquely seated in a position to be able to share this knowledge, and happy to do so for another year. Yeah, the report keeps getting bigger. Eventually, we're going to have to start trimming some stuff down. There's a lot of things, other things that we want to report on that we just don't get the space here to do. So happy to talk about what we have this year for 2024.
One like kind of macro question for you guys before we get into the meat of the report. How much of a go-to-market strategy these days is performance marketing versus brand marketing, content marketing, et cetera? And how have you guys seen that change over the years that you've been in business at Gamesight? And how would you assess like this year relative to the past?
Yeah, I think it's a line that looks up and to the right almost exclusively, and it has for our entire time running this business. I think how steep it is, it's still too shallow. And I think, if we were to talk to, sort of investor types, like the thing that they wish were true was like this sort of the hockey stick of like, oh, everyone figures out performance marketing, and then it's like all gas, no brakes performance marketing, which is broadly what happened in mobile 15 years ago. I don't know how many years ago I spent on that, like over a decade, right? Sort of that advent of performance marketing in mobile. Well, surely that is going to come to other parts of the world. And that has not happened. It has definitely not been a light switch. It has been a gradual acceptance. And it comes from a bunch of different things. I won't go too philosophical on it, but I think that, again, we're talking about our biggest customers. They're older companies. They've been around for a long time. They have been oftentimes obscenely successful brand marketing companies with a history of launching new IPs and growing them globally for decades to the tune of billions of dollars. They're not exactly like, cool, let's shut all that down and turn on this, new widget and hopefully that works. They need to prove it. They need to understand it. And those things are slow and take time. That requires people, requires education, it requires experimentation. I know that's a lot of what, so Christian mentioned that we help customers with early on, where they're like, hey, we just want to try something. We have no idea. We've never done this before, right? Like, how is it going to work? And so it goes up every year. I think the coolest trends to see is when you see a large publisher, sort of start working with performance marketing, you see it go from like year 1 to year 2 to year 3. And it's like, hey, this was a cool little thing we tried. It was someone's side project, to being, hey, now this is someone's full-time job, to now there's a full team. And of course, those all come with budget allocations increasing over time. So that goes up and to the right. I don't sort of foresee it subsuming brand marketing. I think that is here to stay. Certainly in the PC console space, I think that is not just due to like old business practices. I think that also is it's proven to be an effective strategy for gamers. And despite what we might wish would happen, PC and console gaming is still heavily dependent on launch. That the launch moment, the build up to the launch, the iteration and everything that comes up to that, while of course important, is oftentimes in the shadow of was launch successful and was launch big enough. And that is heavily done with brand marketing, where performance often comes, step to.
You bring up a really good point, and when you say it out loud, it makes total sense. But I've noticed the theme is we've grown our business. We work with more cross-platform companies that have brand history or bigger companies, and I've definitely noticed a trend of within those larger companies, if they've had been in the PC console space or done more brand marketing history, there's more of a general sort of like, well, we want to do some control tests to just validate if performance marketing works as a strategy. And from us being in the weeds and doing it for a long time, we're like, well, yeah, of course it works. You just look at the number, and if the number high, it's working. If not, but I have to check myself that these are often companies that build foundations on totally different marketing strategies, and this is a new nascent approach that they still need to validate at a more macro level. Do we believe that this performance marketing strategy just is a valid strategy for a business? So
let me do story time for a second, because this is one of my all-time favorite stories. I worked at the AAA publisher. This was many years ago. Like you said, heavy brand marketing. They had someone who came over from a mobile team to sort of do performance, if you will. It was like moonlighting, right? It's a big company. They had a whole mobile team. It was like moonlighting. Hey, let's do some performance stuff. So, implement it with them, the game launches. This was earlier on in our days as a company. So I was like the, customer support person answering their questions, looked at their report post-launch, and they had spent, let's say, $1 million on performance marketing. Okay. And they generated $2.5 million in revenue from that million. And I was like, this is insane. This is so cool.
Heck yeah.
I was like, what's the budget next month? He's like, well, that was all the money we had. We spent it on lunch. It was like, oh, but if you spent more, or you make more. And he's like, yeah, I know. Of course I know. He's like, but that's not how it works here, right? We are built with our budget around lunch. We have this much money. We're going to use it. It's like, I'm fighting the good fight internally to change that. And so happy ending to this story. They've totally changed the way they think about it. They, of course, now have evergreen, always on marketing that, go up and down based on performance. Right. They still do big launch budgets, but they've sort of restructured the way they think about marketing. And it's a really cool transformation. Now, it was painful at the time because, someone like you, Warren, your skin's probably crawling. You're like, oh, but look at all the money. You just left the city. The numbers, they're so obvious what we should do. But this organizational structure was just not set up to capitalize on it the way that it is now. So good for them. They figured it out.
I think we have a very common story. Yep. I'm definitely having some sweats and reliving some moments from my past.
It's going to be okay, Warren.
So why don't we dig into the meat of the report? I think there's a lot of important stuff here, and let's get into it.
There's a couple ways I'm going to slice this. We're going to dive into the 3 or 4 biggest highlights in a moment. But before we do, what I wanted to do really quickly was just zoom all the way out and pull some of my favorite data trends that you guys had in the report. To anyone listening, we'll link the report in the description of this episode. Highly recommend going digging into all the data. But that being said, I pulled some of my favorite graphs and we'll walk through them now. So first, I wanted to show sort of the highest level conversion trends as we saw progress. There's 2 views I'm about to show. One, conversion by channel, which is to say your install rate, and then retention by channel, which is to say the way you guys define retention is after install is a user still playing the game 7 days later. So my first question is okay, we have a lot of data. What is the overall trend you've seen in progress from 2023 to 2024? And what's the overall hypothesis as to why you're seeing the trends change?
When we look at this, obviously it changes from year to year, but one thing that we've seen kind of consistent over the last 3 years of doing this is the strongest tend to get a little bit stronger. That tends to kind of keep being the case. There's lots of different phenomena that we could talk about that probably lead into that. I would assume it's probably similar for the mobile world, but the big names here are largely the big names that you've seen in previous iterations of the report. Year to year, maybe numbers kind of go like this, but over time, conversion rates have tended to get better across a singular network over a 3-year period. And same thing for retention rates. So what does that tell you? It tells you a couple things. Maybe our advertisers are getting a little bit better at understanding how to use our platform, how to use these platforms, what tools they have available, how to optimize. Those platforms themselves are always trying to improve as well because they're competing against each other. Most of these names on this list are all competitors of other names on this list. And so they're trying to build the best tech and leverage the information that they have in order to spend that advertising budget optimally. Overall broad trend over the last 3 to 4 year period of doing this is the strong continue to get even stronger.
I think that some of the softer side that we sometimes see is some of these networks that we partner with that are focused on this. And this is, something we love to see when Reddit calls us and says, hey, we really want to build the best product and the best discovery mechanism for PC and console games. And they don't say, oh, we've got this big mobile thing. Can it sort of shoehorn its way in there? They go, hey, how is this different and what can we do? And so for sure, we've seen some of those networks that we see them investing in it and then, it takes time, but then the performance increases, that actual products get better, actual optimization gets better. Some of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess.
I mean, just to call it for audio-only listeners, 2 of the really, really stringent examples here, I think that's the right use of that word, are both Twitch and Reddit. I mean, we see growth amongst most of the major channels you expect: YouTube, Google, TikTok, Meta, all improving performance. I think the one that jump out to me the most from this graph is the Twitch performance is ungodly. We'll talk to that extensively in a little bit. And Reddit, exactly what you're saying, is also a place where we're seeing very, very meaningful improvement in terms of conversion rates. The thing that jumps out to me when I think about those channels relative to some of the other channels we talked about, these are places where PC and console gamers live. And it's a very native platform to the segment that you're targeting. So that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, from the day we started this business, a question that has always come up is where can I spend my money to make sure that I'm only reaching people who have the devices to play my games? I think that is a fundamentally different problem than a lot of other businesses have. Your Netflix, your Spotify, anyone you reach with an ad, if you're reaching them with an ad, they can use your app, your website, whatever on that device. PC and console games don't work that way. Many of our customers have built super high-end AAA games that not only can they not just work, not only do they PC only, but they have to be high-end PC only. And so the networks that I think over time have found better ways to surface the players that even can't play a game. And that's forget about targeting, forget about genres, and forget about are they likely to like your game? Just, can they even play your game? Do they own a PlayStation? Do they own an Xbox? We're seeing more and more attempts to have sort of targeting sets that limit players that are never going to buy your game, which is of course a waste of money and it's going to lower your conversion rates pretty drastically.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, Adam. I think that's probably the number one way that PC console advertisers waste money is just showing ads to people who literally do not have a way to play the game, even if they wanted to.
Even if they want, this is so cool. Like, unfortunately for me, I don't own a $3,000 computer and I won't be able to purchase your game. Thanks though.
Cool. Okay, so that's, I think, a really good sort of high-level overview. There's one more slice of the data that I really liked from your report that I want to just quickly touch on. And this is the same metrics, conversion rate as well as retention, but split by free-to-play versus premium. So this is a place, Warren and I live in free-to-play La La Land. So I was trying to talk to my buddy last night about, like, he's like, how do I launch your game? And I'm like, wait, is it premium? Like, I have no fucking idea. Good talk. Sort of joking. Hire us, Justin. So, talk me through a little bit about these trends. So this chart goes back to 2022. Talk to us about the trends that you're seeing in terms of conversion rates as well as retention in free-to-play versus premium, and what's your thesis on why these evolutions are occurring?
Looking back, I mean, some of the last year's numbers here are here too. One of the big phenomena that we pulled out, that report that kind of surprised us, like we could kind of feel some of this, but when we finally got our eyes on the data, it made a lot of sense, was that, free-to-play retention was definitely down. Premium retention was up, but premium conversion rates were down. So it was like this weird kind of effect that didn't make sense immediately when you looked at it. But then you zoomed out and looked at the release calendar for that year. There were so many huge, highly anticipated, big AAA games. I mean, like past Street Fighter 6, Horizon, a new Horizon entry, Liza P, a Star Wars entry, RE4 remake, like so many huge games that on any other year, each of them would have had a great chance of winning a game of the year. So there was just a really crowded field. It seemed like that lots of great games that people were excited about kind of hurt some of the free to play, like how long are people going to stick around and play some of those games. So I think what we've largely seen is a return to normal from that last year where everything was really crowded. There was a bit of a logjam of what people wanted to play. And so this year, things seem to have balanced out a little bit more in line with what we've seen prior years.
And just for terminology, when you guys are producing reports or conversion, what is Gamesight defining as a conversion?
So we've actually updated it slightly this year, and we went back and recalculated previous years just to make sure that the comparisons were a little bit more apples to apples. We had traditionally defined conversion as just installs, right? So like an app install or a game install, all the same. What we found was that, especially in PC console gaming, we have so many of our biggest and most successful titles that have been with Gamesight for years. I mean, they've same games that may be running for like 3 or 4 years of measurement. And at a certain point in that life cycle, those publishers aren't really concerned about winning new players anymore. They're trying to retain and win back people that have churned out like 2 seasons ago. Like, hey, we've got this new content. We want to go win back those people that have already put, 100 hours into this game, but they've churned away. Let's go try to win those people back. And so what we found was that the marketing that they were doing was pretty undervalued in the way that we were defining conversions for reports like this, which kind of deflated some of the numbers. And it wasn't really a great comparison of who was performing well across PC and console generally. So it's kind of a blended metric now to take into account, are these advertisers running primarily conversion-based campaigns, or are they running primarily retargeting type of campaigns? And so it kind of blends those values together to get a slightly more precise metric at what we're trying to show, which networks are most performant.
That makes sense, especially as like the industry gets more and more mature. For any companies that have been around for a while, getting those existing users re-engaged back in the games, making new purchases becomes a more important part of the strategy.
Right, and also more expensive, right? More expensive to win a net new user versus to reactivate somebody that's already spent money, already spent time, but just might not like the content for this season. You might be able to win them back much more efficiently.
Well, and I think we also see from revenue impact standard, it's similar, right? Like for Destiny 2 last year, you have the the final shape, which is between $60 and $100 one-time purchase. It functions similarly to a game release and a net new sale from a business standpoint and a revenue standpoint, as it does from a sort of UA or marketing standpoint. You're bringing a player in, if they haven't played Destiny in 3 years, that there's functionally no difference between them and a new player. Obviously, hopefully those people are easier to win, but when we're thinking measurement, was this campaign successful at bringing people in to purchase the final shape? That's the sort of conversion count that we know they actually care about.
A ton of sense.
Makes sense.
Marginally different than the way that we think about performance on mobile. Okay,
Right.
So appreciate that high-level overview. You have a number of really interesting key highlights, and I sort of want to dig into that next. And so the sort of like headline first bullet point on your TLDR part of your report was Twitch plus YouTube, holistically the best way to drive success in PC console. So I think that's a really significant takeaway. Can you talk a little bit about Twitch plus YouTube as a channel for acquisition plus retention? Can you quantify how effective this is and talk about that synergy? and why you think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, the quantification, the report kind of speaks for itself. They're really high performers across all of those metrics, the conversions, the retention, they do really well. We kind of categorize them as like content-driven platforms as opposed to like pure performance marketing like a Facebook or a Google, or more of like community social types of networks like X or Reddit. We would kind of consider Twitch and YouTube and to some extent TikTok to be more of these content-driven platforms. And so that leads to a couple of things that you can kind of take advantage of as an advertiser. There's tons of room for creativity. You can also reach gamers right in front of the content that's most relevant to what you're trying to sell them. They might be watching gaming videos. They might be watching their favorite streamer that's playing a competitive title. So the kind of association with the content that you're trying to show them is already really strong. Contextually, you can reach them at a time that they might be really amenable to looking for your content as well. So all these things kind of add on top of each other to make these platforms really, really strong. That's why historically they've always been kind of top performers. And YouTube, we actually started breaking that out a couple years ago as a separate thing, simply because of that, because it performs so well, even compared to some of the other Google products and properties. Sort of the drawback, though, to these, one of the places where they fall short is on the volume scoring. We also score these platforms based on volume, how many individual advertisers use them. And that's just because they're expensive. It's more expensive to run these types of ads. It's more expensive to produce these types of ads. It takes a different skill set to create a great high quality video ad for Twitch or YouTube than it does for somebody to, boost organic content on TikTok or create like a social post on Reddit or X. So that's kind of the fit. It's a more of a content-driven strategy. There's lots of room for creativity, but there are some drawbacks around cost and execution.
Yeah, on Twitch in particular, like it definitely feels a lot more like TV advertising as far as like the content that's being shown on there than it does like traditional performance marketing.
Right. Yeah. Very expensive. You're trying to make a splash versus, other types of strategies and tactics that would differ if you're seeing somebody place an ad on Reddit or something like that for sure.
But one of the reasons that the insight got combined together sort of the way it did is, I guess, like my personal experiences for it seems to be validated by the data is like YouTube is a great kind of like door opener. A game gets on their radar, they see it, they go, oh, this is interesting. And then Twitch is sort of the like homework. That's like the deep dive. That's the research. It's like, oh, cool. This game did seem interesting enough. Let me go find someone who's, they're 6 hours into the game. I can really see what it's like. I get beyond the trailer of it all to see what this really is. And that's where like the purchase decision is ultimately made. It's like, okay, this seems like a game I actually want to play or want to buy. The combo, the kind of opener and the closer, if you will, between YouTube and Twitch, is that sort of what the data supported?
Yeah, I mean, you're finding people with high intent at that point because they've already invested time into like seeing content that's either similar or directly about that game. One thing that you see is like, it's kind of counterintuitive, is that click-through rates on some of these platforms might actually be lower than something like a Google search or a Reddit. But when they do click, the conversion rate is much higher because you found someone that, as Adam is saying, you've already opened a little bit to seeing your game, to seeing your content. They've already seen a lot about it. They've seen their favorite streamer play it or favorite YouTuber play it, and now they're ready to buy. And so you're kind of hitting them right when they need to see that ad in order to be redirected and they can purchase.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think as the industry gets more mature, we start to see like for different sections of video games, how content creators can play a different role and channels like Twitch can play a different role. Because for free to play, you don't need much convincing to try a game. You see an ad and it looks fun. Sure, it's free. I'll try it. Us doing some work in PC, doing some work in Web3, there's some things that rhyme in the need and power of content creators in those sections and why it's more so than mobile. In both cases, you're making more of an investment in one way or another to play in the game. So it rarely works to just show someone an ad for something that they're going to have to make a more significant investment in. Like it gets exactly as you said, Adam, it gets their attention. And then first thing I do is like, cool, let me see someone actually playing this. Let me go to a content creator whose opinion I trust, see what they think about it. And there's like a deeper funnel sales process where you need to be onboarded into the game a little bit.
Yeah, I think one speed bump or kind of like you can visualize the learning curve a little bit. When we have people come from a primarily mobile background to PC console, they're so used to like, I'm running iOS ads, I'm running Android ads. I'm directly talking to someone who can download my game for free or like $1.99 on the same device that they're already on. They don't even think about things like hard drive space, and so much of it is like freer on this freemium model. When they come to PC console for the first time, some of the thought around like, how much am I asking of my user? How long are these conversion cycles? How much am I asking of them that might impact some of the things that I'm seeing in my reporting? Like, well, my Google ads perform so much better for the iOS version of this game than the Xbox version. And it's like, well, yeah, you're serving PC ads for a $60 game that's on a different device, it takes up 30 or 40 gigs, which might be like a quarter or a third of that person's hard drive space. So like, yeah, there's all these other considerations. It's just things that may seem so similar are actually so different when you switch from mobile to PC and console. And we see that a lot for first timers.
And I think the one thing, just to linger on this very briefly, because there's a lot of other interesting topics to get to, is the fact that only 18% of media plans include Twitch, which if you look at your data, it's the highest converting channel according to your metrics. And yet only minority of folks continue to use it even this year after you've seen massive growth.
They have high minimums. They have bespoke creatives. Cost of doing business on there just is higher. And I think that number also might be underrepresented in that there are oftentimes community influencer social teams that might be working there, but it's not part of the media budget and media plan. So like publishers that interact with Twitch or do something on Twitch is certainly going to be higher. But when you look at pure media budget, I think those would be the two reasons that it's going to be under where, like, I don't know, data dictates it maybe ought to be.
Just to double down on that point, we might have a game that we're doing measurement for that is not advertising on Twitch in the traditional sense, but then they're spending like $250,000 on influencers on Twitch. So to kind of support Adam's point, it's not necessarily that they're ignoring it. They might just be using it in a slightly different way. But then yes, the cost implications can be prohibitive. And it's not as true for YouTube, but kind of similar vein. The cost for both of these platforms to run a single ad is just going to be higher on a cost adjusted basis than any of the other platforms that we're talking about.
Just think that's an important thing to call out. A lot of what we're discussing is the quality of the traffic between these channels. We're not so much in this report, unless I missed it, not so much speaking to like comparative like CPM costs between channels. And as we all know, like performance marketing is a game of arbitrage, of finding where there's mispriced inventory relative to the quality of that inventory.
And I think Twitch, extremely high CPMs and high minimums. So it's a, I guess, riskier and higher cost test if you wanted to try. If it's push or non-advertising, let's do a $10,000 test buy that. It's just much, much more difficult than, going to setting up a Facebook account or whatever.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, let's move on. I think the next one that I saw, next channel that I thought was really interesting when I reflected on your data, and you guys called out explicitly, was Reddit. So Reddit, you've seen a pretty impressive improvement over the previous year. I want to talk about these changes and I want to quantify them.
Reddit, I think the biggest thing that we've noticed, and Adam referred to partnerships that we built with different ad platforms. Reddit's one of those for sure. They've really doubled down on performance marketing support just kind of across the board, but they definitely have teams that are dedicated to PC console gaming, different teams that are dedicated to mobile. So they're trying to build out all of these different solutions for these different market segments that they support. Part of what you've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it on the mobile side as well, is the amount of different types of ad products that they have grown significantly even over the last 2 or 3 years. That adoption curve is kind of like lagging behind when those things get released. So we've seen things that have been around for 2 years. Maybe people are just now seeing like, oh, I can like sponsor AMA, or I can do like a takeover of this entire category. And they're seeing really good performance behind that. And then the other thing is kind of more on the infrastructure side and support for advertising is they are now general access with their conversions API. So now you can pass conversion data back to Reddit. Now they know what's working and what's not and can help optimize that budget for you. Bigger platforms have been able to do this for a long time. Reddit was definitely punching above its weight in previous years when they didn't have that support. And so now that they do have that, we're going to expect to continue to see them continue to climb these rankings over the next few years.
For those who might just be listening, some of the data that we have on screen right now is showing the retention rate for users coming in from Reddit year over year. And we basically see a doubling in 2024 versus 2023, about 50% over 23%. And a similar but not quite as drastic improvement in conversion rate, with 2024 being roughly 25% higher than 2023 conversion rate.
And the thing that's missing here, which I'd be curious if you have anecdotal evidence to articulate one way or another, is like, how have you seen that costs are moving against these conversion rates and retention rate increases?
Anecdotally, can't really say, and definitely can't say with the data, just because we don't actually get a whole lot of cost data back from Reddit. It's very spotty, so it's something that we can't really comment on from a data standpoint, unfortunately. Would love to, but don't really have the supporting data at the moment.
Warren, do you have any insight in terms of Reddit trials trending over the last year or so, just from our portfolio?
For me, this is like, I mentioned up top, like one of the reasons I like talking to the Gamesight team is we identify sort of like blind spots. So it's probably been about a year since we did our last serious Reddit testing. And one of the reasons we did is we saw like pretty poor performance, candidly, relative to other channels. So it's great to hear from you guys that they've launched a number of new products and there's been some meaningful changes year over year. So one of my action items after this is maybe considering like some fresh testing on Reddit.
This may be 2 reports ago, and I don't even remember if we talked about it on this podcast, but I think that Reddit was one of the ones where there was like pretty serious like delta between like works and doesn't work, and that kind of variance was high. And I think we anecdotally probably looked at and hypothesized that creatives matter a lot, and like creatives that feel native to Reddit. It's not that like, the agency did a bad job, but like some games don't feel right on Reddit. Some games really do. Personally, I notice sometimes I'll see an ad on Reddit and it has like lots of comments and discussions and upvotes, and you're like, oh, people are like engaging with this ad as though it's just normal content on Reddit. And then other ones that sort of clearly stand out as this is an ad, I'm going to scroll past this. I just think other platforms have a tighter spread of kind of like things that work. In Reddit, I think a little higher variant. So I think when you just look at raw averages in Gamesight, you are getting some of our partners that maybe Reddit's their best platform and they're getting the best conversion rates and they're putting the most budget and it's working the best for them. That's blended with the folks that just aren't finding it works for them. Eventually, the folks that find it don't work, turn it off. So probably is you're getting the winner sample size in here a little more than the loser sample size.
I think that's a huge part of it. And definitely, the creative that works on Reddit is going to be bespoke and native feeling to Reddit. And that's something that a lot of teams struggle with early on. The other thing that I think, in my learnings of past testing is like in years past, Reddit was just behind its competition as far as like the targeting capabilities and how advanced their conversion optimization offerings were. That's one area where we just saw them like fall short. It was on the spectrum of brand spend to like highly advanced algorithmic conversion based spend, closer to that brand end where you can target based on interest and things like that. And it sounds like some of that stuff has really evolved in the last year or two as well.
I think one other thing that we've noticed, and this is just kind of separate from like working in the industry, just like being a gamer or being someone that uses the internet, is Reddit has, Google stated this explicitly, it's climbed up search results. It has a little bit stronger of a weighting than it did in previous years. This kind of enhances some of its discoverability as well for people looking for associated content. They might not even be directly looking for it on Reddit, accidentally find it through a Google search. So if I search for like, Bungie new season or whatever, there's a decent chance I'm going to see the Reddit post on that, and I'll go to that and I might see a Reddit ad, and that might be what I need to find the content.
I think that's a great thing to call out, Christian. I had definitely noticed that anecdotally of just like in my searches, Reddit more often being a top result, but I hadn't connected the dots to meaning like this is happening to everyone else also, which is meaning like a huge influx of net new traffic to Reddit for potential marketers. So it's a great thing to call out.
They're like logged in DAU. I mean, they obviously forward on this. Their logged in DAU has like gradually grown. In the past few years, their unlogged in DAU, so like organic users like this, has increased even sharper. So that definitely probably helps with some of this.
Yeah, and this is something we see we do a lot of search optimization for our core product of Uptick, and we go head to head with Reddit in terms of like video game marketing, which we are competitive with, but it's like then you have a Reddit post somewhere like, how do I do video game marketing? It's like number one.
Let's just hope that's good content.
Well, if it's not, you can just come to uptick.com. We get all your video game marketing. I just gotta get the plugins. Cool. Well, we're just gonna like jump right on the third rail next and talk about everyone's favorite platform, Twitter/X. Hopefully we don't get demonetized for talking about this. Just joking. Talk a little about the trends in terms of how X is as a games marketing platform. I know Warren has some thoughts here as well. And quantify how valuable it is relative to its competition. And then I'll throw a graphic up here, which is a really interesting one that you guys pulled, which is performance marketing to a games platform.
Yeah, so it's one that obviously had a keen eye on the past couple of years, the past couple of times we've run this report for obvious reasons. We kind of anticipated like, hey, maybe we'll see like a huge drop off here. And the thing that surprised us the first time and that's continued to surprise us is there hasn't been a huge drop off in our advertisers using it. And over time, I think that's made a little bit more sense. I think a lot of the things that you hear in the news are those traditional brand advertisers, people like Apple, people like PepsiCo, like these big brand advertisers, a lot more brand sensitive. They're pulling their ad dollars out. And Warren mentions this concept of arbitrage. I think you're seeing an influx of a lot of cheaper CPMs all of a sudden because a whole lot of that ad budget is suddenly gone. That's a huge source of revenue for that company. And what seems to have happened is that gaming advertisers have kind of taken advantage of that. So as far as X's place in a gaming advertisers portfolio, there's opportunity there if you're trying to make some efficient ROI. Other competitors like Mastodon and Blue Sky really don't pose a serious threat at the moment. They don't even have advertising infrastructure yet. And so some of the value that we've seen customers grab out of X is strong community ties. So kind of similar to Reddit in that sense. You can kind of do great targeting for people talking about the things that are relevant to your games and your ads. On a cost-adjusted basis, the ROI tends to be pretty good because the costs are so low. But then just being mindful of risk. Like that's always going to be something that advertisers have to come back to is like, you're not getting these cheaper CPMs for free. There is something to consider there. And some of our bigger advertisers have maybe been a little bit more hesitant, but like on the medium to like smaller end, they're okay accepting that risk because they know they can get great returns on it. So that's something that we've seen kind of like meta on the X platform.
And then Christian, can you remind me, I also think that, I don't remember if it was Spring 24, 2023, but sort of like post ownership change, there was a renewed focus on performance. And we had, I think, conversion API didn't exist, I believe, for PC and console. Like there was a mobile one, there was no conversion API for PC console. Then there was one, we obviously integrated with it. And so, performance for our customers, specifically for PC consoles, games were able to, performance optimize in a way
That's a big deal out.
I just can't recall if that was like, it might have been like the end of 2023. So maybe we saw that performance gains. And then, so Christian, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then I think the last thing is I believe they also were pretty aggressive in ad credits offerings for PC and console games. And like ad credit programs work great if the performance is good because get people in and then they stay. Performance sucks, then people just leave. So I think those two things also kind of, you don't read about those are like not in the headlines in the news. People are talking about those like deep kind of like business operational things that practitioners care about. And those things I think both were big kind of tailwinds for 2024.
Well, true. And yeah, the timing on that is correct. It was right around the ownership transition that they started really doubling down on like, we need to make money. We need to make money. Performance marketing is one of those ways that we can make money. And we saw them start to build out better infrastructure. We saw some different ad products pop up that weren't in existence before. And it's actually interesting, kind of in preparation for this, I went and looked at like how much some of these things have changed over time. And a lot of Twitter's ad products look kind of similar to the offerings that Reddit has. And these would be they fit into that kind of social community driven bucket of your overall media plan as a PC console advertiser. So it kind of makes sense. Similar strategies, reaching similar people in similar ways, just some different considerations that you might have there.
Well, I think we talked about it earlier, but it is also easier, well, not perfect, easier to find players who own the devices that they need because of just like how follow graphs work. Certainly possible that a purely mobile player is following 10 different, AAA PC console game developers, but probably much less likely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And so the other graph I want to throw up here that I think is interesting to talk through, and the reason I think we do it now is the context of Twitter and how abnormal it is relative to the other channels. And this is performance by platform-related marketing. What this is showing to those who are listening only is a chart of the major ad networks, X, TikTok, YouTube, Meta, Reddit, and then showing the extent to which you have the capacity to target different platforms, so PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. And I think that the thing that's really interesting here is how anomalous Twitter is toward its capacity to target PlayStation users. And so talk a little bit about that, and then the Japanese affinity, which I did not know was a thing until I read this report.
To be fair to your point, Xander, yeah, this completely surprised us too. We kind of stumbled across this accidentally just looking at different breakouts by different types of things like geo and platform, and we ended up finding like, whoa, why is PlayStation so performant? And it wasn't like a blip. This was very consistent across advertisers that were using X and targeting different geos, and advertisers that had multi-platform games on console where PlayStation was one tended to perform really good. And so doing some research on this, it turns out that Japan is the second largest population of users of X outside of the US. In addition to that, they have a huge community of VTubers, obviously very popular in Japan. They play a lot of JRPGs and competitive shooters on stream. So like all of these kind of circles of the Venn diagram just so happen to come together in a way that makes X a really good place to advertise on X if you're going for PlayStation conversions, especially in Japan. So it was something that definitely popped out to us as surprising. It's not something that we were originally looking for, but a cool like consequence of a couple factors coming together and like building on top of each other in that way.
Makes sense.
And a lot of this is rhyming with what we found working on X in the last year on our team side, as well as doing user acquisition work for the games we support. Adam, you spoke to some of this. There's been really aggressive credits given out. Credits are kind of funny because it's not real money. And if you're giving a credit to all your advertisers, it kind of cancels it out. But it does convince us to spend more money. So good job, X. And we've definitely seen, I think what you said is spot on, Adam. So there was like a flight of, and we work with clients too who are sensitive for brand considerations about advertising on X. So I won't speak to that, but for those focused on performance, we definitely saw increased performance on X over the last year. And again, kind of comes back to arbitrage. If there's less brand advertisers pumping up the cost of CPMs and the users are relatively the same on the other end of that, then that's good for performance marketers. So I would expect, and yeah, anecdotally, like if anything, maybe the percentage of their advertiser pie that is performance-based marketers has been increasing as there's been some brand shyness and increased offerings to improve performance outcomes.
The interesting about performance marketing is it's a much more robust revenue stream than brand revenue stream. I don't know if you guys remember sometime during COVID, under the Trump administration, a bunch of advertisers pulled out of Facebook because they're trying to boycott Facebook. And it basically had zero impact on the overall Facebook revenue because everyone else was like, wait, they're gone. Let's just keep spending more on Facebook. And so that's the beauty of performance marketing as a revenue stream versus brand marketing. It is more touchy-feely.
You say it much nicer, Xander. I was just going to say we're just vultures in performance marketing.
I'm going a little bit of an audible. I think it would be remiss if I didn't talk to Gamesight about influencers. And so I want to just really quickly, towards the end here, touch on the rise of influencers as a marketing channel, why it's important, different, and how often do you see it in a marketing mix? And I will throw up some charts that you guys have because there's some interesting charts about this as well.
I'll start with just the base concept, which I think we talked about a little bit already on, kind of the Twitch and YouTube, which is the average gamer now, when they're making a purchasing decision on PC and console about whether they want to buy a game or not, is using content creators to vet and validate what that's a decision to make. I think that's something that we just need to accept. This is how game purchasing is made. What a marketer can do about it, there's a whole bunch of different paths, and we've talked about some, we can talk about some others, but that purchase decision flow often goes through, I want to see what this game is really like. And the best way to do it is to watch someone, hopefully trust, like Warren said, someone that you know and trust, hopefully someone who's sort of an expert in that particular genre of games or has similar game preferences to yours. So that just is the core part of the game discovery process in 2025. I think what has kind of changed is creators as marketing vehicles for those messages has, I would say, been a roller coaster for the last decade of what people try to do, what works, what philosophies are. Are these walking billboards? Are these community members? Are these I don't know, everything in between. And I would say the roller coaster of it all, I've seen all of those as, game publishers sort of opinions on how this works and how it should work. Should we measure this on a CPM basis? No, that's, total nonsense, because someone play your game for an hour and a half is nothing at all like someone scrolling past Reddit ad. These are very, very different things. And not has always been a struggle, is that content creators and influencers, YouTube videos, Twitch streams, etc., are new. They're different. They don't function exactly like other things. What does it mean if someone watches your game for an hour? It's really difficult to quantify that in terms of something like a CPM. So that's a little bit of a soapbox. But one of the things that I think we have seen in the weeds on actual sort of sponsored content, influencer marketing, where you're paying content creators to play games, talk about games, is that the efficacy of that has gone generally up over time. I think there's been bumps along the way. And a few of the things that I sort of would posit as reasons is, one, they're more professional. People have gotten better at this. 5 years ago, how you talk about a game when you are being sponsored to play it looked different than it does now. It was very much the you're a shill. Why are you you don't really believe this? And I think we've graduated beyond that. It is such a part of the influencer ecosystem that consumers are wizened up to it, and creators are better at how to do that. So just that tactically, I think there's more professionality from the content creation influencer side, and that increases performance. I think mentioned a little bit, but the consumer sort of understanding and acceptance of it has also gone up. You used to go on Twitch and you wouldn't really see as much sponsored content. You would see mostly organic stuff. So sponsored content would want to stick out, where now it is just no one has a creator that they watch for a long period of time where they're not used to seeing sponsored content, ads, etc., in the mix. It just become accustomed to that. But I think those two things have made a big difference. And then advertisers, being developers, have gotten smarter about how to who to work with, how to make you're working with people who play games like the game, which audiences like your game. Things are going to increase conversion massively. I think when we first started out in the space, a lot of the, call it influencer marketing, was done by PR teams and PR firms, and they have very different, almost back to our brand marketing, performance marketing discussion. They're looking for different things. When a PR person says, hey, let's work with this content creator, that runs through a different layer of filter than when certainly a performance marketer does. One uses numbers, one uses all sorts of other, qualitative methods. I'd say over time, this has trended towards quant. It has trended towards marketing professionals, performance or otherwise, and trended away from, call it community PR, some of the softer skills. Not that they're not involved and not that they're not important, but when you look at dollars and you look at conversion rates, I think they've trended up because the people who are allocating that care, and that's their KPI. So they're going to optimize for it versus maybe a PR person whose KPI might be something like sentiment. Maybe it's views. And so our customers and our data is always going to be biased towards people who believe in performance marketing. Okay. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't work with us. So you do see those go up as performance marketing professionals are putting more up their time, and then more budgets end up in their lap. So I guess end rant.
Awesome. Well, I guess we spoke to Christian. Do you have anything to add about the influencer trends that you think is interesting?
I think I agree mostly with what Adam said, with the growth and kind of acceptance of it, both on the consumer side, but then also on the advertiser publisher side as well. I think the area that I still see for growth is, while it has trended more towards quant, which is great for us, I think there's still sometimes a disconnect between like which metrics matter. We have a lot of publishers that still come to us and they say like, they're assuming that they should be optimizing for things like subscribers, followers, and things like that. And just over time, it's proven time and time again that that's not the best optimal strategy for running an influencer campaign. There are other things that matter. Adam referenced things like, what is the value of a viewer? What is the value of a viewer watching an ad for like a half second as it scrolls by versus somebody sitting in a stream, watching, engaging in chat? Those are largely different things. Those are things that we quantify. Those are things that we price against. So when Warren talks about looking for inefficiencies, there are inefficiencies within the influencer marketing space, right, that we try to find and we try to optimize for. And I think that's generally why we have such great results, and our customers keep coming back to us. And even if they started as an attribution customer, they kind of believe in the quantitative part of it that we bring to that space. And then, we bring that over to the influencer side as well, and they start using us for multiple products and services. So expecting to continue to see that grow and continue to see that mind shift in the influencer space as well.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is a place where we've been investing very seriously for the last year or so. Okay, well, that's going to be it for us. I can't recommend this report strongly enough. We did like a drive-by of a lot of the high-level things, but there's actually a ton more stuff that was in the outline that we didn't get to. So definitely we'll link that in the description. Thanks for joining us. Any final words?
Go Birds. Go Birds. No, go Birds. I can't believe we got this far. No, go Birds. Go Birds.
Don't worry, the green lights behind me. I mean, they're always green, but cannot walk the streets if I don't support the Eagles here.
I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you. Well, go Birds. That's the sign off.
Adam, Christian, it was a pleasure as always. Really enjoy any opportunity to talk shop and get you guys insights. Yes, everyone, please read the Gamesight report. This was the tip of the iceberg. There is a ton of juicy stuff. If you work in even if you don't work in marketing, if you work in any segment of the game industry, especially if you work in marketing, there's gonna be a lot of juicy bits in here for you. So as always, the pod was brought to you by our team here at Uptick. Here at Uptick, we help games grow. We make creative. We do performance marketing stuff. We help with social growth. We build really cool BI and data science models to predict the future actions and future revenue from your game. We do it all. And you can reach us on our website. It's uptick.com, upptic.com. We'll see you there.
Talk soon.